So budget debate 2025 is now over. The governing Jamaica Labour Party and the opposition People's National Party, they've put forward their ideas. They've made their best case as to why they should form the next government. How did they do? But for me, more important is what happens next. And I want to hear what you think about all of it. So make sure you drop your comments below. I'm Dionne Jackson Miller. Thank you so much for joining me. Time for tea. So I do think the budget debate is a hard watch, right? It's hours and hours and hours of speechifying in Parliament. Whole heap of data, many times, lots and lots of background material. The two parties tend to go back for decades to say, them don't know what them do. Them did mash up the place. We know what we do. We're the ones you're supposed to choose. And as I said, it can go on for hours. Most people, I think, probably want to know two things. Are there going to be any new taxes? And what are you going to do that can make my life better? I posted on X asking people what they think about the format of the budget debate as well as whether they watch. Here are some of the answers. Boom Energy says, I've been paying attention for several years now. I find the budget interesting, not something to fear. I like when a leader has a plan and can articulate that plan by telling me where they intend to go. The big part is when I see those plans being implemented and I'm benefiting. Aspiring Holistic Otaku says, I don't really care about anything but the price of gas, house and patty. And I don't watch talk around that. I watch my receipts. Also making the minimum wage livable. It's been like 4 years since TVJ, I think, did a 2-part special on how the minimum wage wasn't livable. Yeah, it's gone up, but it's still not really livable. People just make it work instead of burning stuff down because jail and Bellevue not nice. And of course, the Prime Minister this year once again announced an increase in the minimum wage up to $16,000 a week, up from $15,000. Members of the Minimum Wage Commission aren't happy with the process, with how it was done, said they weren't consulted. But there you go. The PNP also raised the issue of a livable wage, saying they'd set up a commission to look at that. So more on that. I'd take the political aspect out of it and make it solely about the budget for the fiscal year. Jamaican Sus says, watch it every year. I'd change the format to give every elected MP the same opportunity to make some contribution. The opposition leader does need an entire day. It should be used for everyone. If we had a true independent or third-party MP, they would be able to participate this way. So I appreciate the idea for reform, but I don't support this particular idea. Apart from the budget debate, we do have the sectoral debates and we have the constituency debates. So every MP does get a chance to participate. People in the Senate as well, because we have the State of the Nation debate in the Senate. So everybody does get a chance to contribute. I think the budget debate needs to be exactly what it is, for broad national issues to do with the budget, and the people who participate are the right people, I think. Croc Wildside says, I would have preferred for Mr. Golding to have said what he later said about the implementation of certain initiatives he had outlined in his budget presentation during his initial address. Well, I agree, and I soon come to that. Now, Tyrone says, not change but introduce 30 minutes rebuttal afterwards from the opposition leader and the finance spokesperson on the same day on issues only related to the budget, strictly no interference from other members of the House. Again, I like the idea, trying to make it more of a real debate. Not sure if this particular proposal, this way of doing it, would be entirely fair though, because remember the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister spend months probably working on their presentations with big teams. If you're going to give the opposition 30 minutes on the same day to respond, remember they haven't seen the presentations beforehand. What kind of research would they be able to do to make really informed rebuttals? So again, I like the idea of reform. Let's keep those ideas coming, but I don't think this particular one, or exactly the way it's structured, would necessarily hold up. I do think we need some kind of change. I think the presentations are way too long. Prime Minister this year went, must say, over 5 hours. Now, that's not unusual. Finance ministers and prime ministers often take hours and hours, but that doesn't mean that it's desirable. I would love to see them constrained. I don't think many people outside of media, people in government, political supporters, and the people who are already deeply engaged on governance issues are going to be sitting down and watching or listening to all of that. I suspect most people follow it based on what's carried, whether in the media or on social media. And I would like to see them constrained to 2 hours. Give them 2 hours, full stop, no extension. Let's see what you can come up with in 2 hours. Keep it tight, keep it relevant, keep it incisive. Give a broad overview. More details can follow later. But maybe there's an argument for saying, let them talk as long as they want to talk and we can pick what we want to pick out of it after. Also, maybe there's an argument for saying if you're going to lay out a broad vision for our country, you need as much time as you can get to do it. Speaking of which, I'd said in a previous video that I didn't think either the Prime Minister or the opposition leader had yet laid out their vision for the country. Obviously, this budget presentation, as I keep saying, the last one before election, this was the place to do it. How did they do? I do think content-wise, it was pretty good on both sides. I thought we heard some interesting arguments, some interesting proposals. Prime Minister Holness, for instance, went back to what he called the Aspire program that he announced some months ago. A being access to economic opportunity for all, inclusive growth, safety and security. P for people and human capital development. I for infrastructure development. R, reforming bureaucracy. E, economic diversification. And he made a number of interesting proposals. One of them that I liked, for instance, was the idea of creating new urban centers in areas like Negril and Old Harbour, similar to what the Factories Corporation is now doing in Morant Bay. And seeing that, I grew up in St. Thomas, I'm really excited to see what's happening there, and I'm looking forward to see how it's going to come out, how it's going to work, how it's going to relate to what is now the centre of Morant Bay. He spoke about logistics, the expansion of shipping, which I know is a really big and potentially even bigger area for us. Now, the PNP, the finance spokesperson Julian Robinson, the opposition leader Mark Golding, they came out with letters of their own, what they're calling the 4 E's: efficiency, education, energy, emerging industries, focusing on sectors like the cultural and creative industry, for instance. I found that interesting. So let's say that both sides did lay out a vision and also quite a bit of detail about how they're going to realize that. An obvious problem, though, with the presentations from the opposition was that there was a lack of any numbers, no sense really of whether these proposals were feasible within the budget, how much they would cost the country. For example, they proposed a meal at lunch for every student in need in primary and secondary school. They proposed a transportation subsidy for students in rural Jamaica. Both ideas I like and I would like to see put in place. Are they feasible? So in the finance minister's closing budget presentation, and I should say, because I mentioned earlier on that everybody wants to hear if we're going to have taxes, and this was another budget where the finance minister was happy to be saying no new taxes. Now, in her budget presentation, she made what I thought was a really smart move in closing the budget presentation. She put an estimate to the opposition's proposals, and she then criticized what she called their implied budget. Now, I'm not trying to analyze her numbers, whether her numbers were off or not. The opposition says they were off. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about her introducing this idea of an implied budget, although the opposition leader, Mr. Golding, wrote several times objecting to what she was doing, saying that's not what he was trying to do, but you can see where she was going. She's saying any idea, any proposal must have a cost. And since they aren't costing it, we are costing it. That's what she was saying. She was also saying whether they want to say they were presenting a budget or not, because they were putting forward programs and ideas, there must be an implied cost to all of that, hence an implied budget. So the PNP then called a press conference to explain their numbers. I interviewed Mr. Golding after the press conference and I asked why they hadn't presented the numbers during the budget debate. This is what he said. He said she, that's the finance minister, was misrepresenting the costings of what we plan to do and implying that when we presented that, we were somehow presenting a budget, which is not what oppositions do. He said when they form government, there'll already be a budget in place. So what they were doing is presenting the vision and policy commitments for the first term in office for the next PNP government. He said all of it was premised by an express and clear commitment to adherence to the fiscal rules. So the opposition was saying they would be working within the budget that was in place, and what we were hearing was the specific proposals that they would implement, but within that budget. He's saying they wouldn't overspend. That's honestly strange to me, though, because people don't want to just hear ideas by themselves, especially at this stage so close to an election. As I said to Mr. Golding, people want to hear, are these just wild campaign promises, or have you actually costed them and thought them through? Details matter at this point. Now, this is what Mr. Golding said. He said we didn't formulate it as a budget because we will be in a budget. So the rolling out of our proposals and the phasing of them is something that will have to be considered when we form government. He said a lot will depend on what's happening in the economy at the time. Are we going to continue to have a sluggish economy? He said we're coming out of 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth, and we don't really know what's been happening with the tax take, so there are a lot of things we'd have to look at when we form government. He said they'd have to look at the discretionary expenditure in the budget that was just approved, 360 billion, and decide what areas they would continue with, what they would defer, what might be scaled down, what might be completely discontinued. Because he said at the end of the day, people aren't voting them in to continue what the JLP had been doing. They would be voted in to say what they want to do, so there would have to be some adjustment to how that discretionary expenditure is rolled out. I'm not convinced though. I think those kinds of details, including the kinds of assumptions you have to make, all that should have been included in the budget debate itself. I think the opposition really allowed the government to put them on the defensive, so they now have to be fighting to counter this idea of a costly implied budget. And I don't know how they couldn't have foreseen this one, because if you're putting forward ideas, the first thing people are going to want to know is, can we afford it? Now, maybe people just didn't pay attention to previous budget presentations as much as this one. That's natural, but right now this is a big one. The last one, as I keep saying, before the general election. So anything you're saying you want to do, people are going to want to know a lot of information about it, including how is it going to be funded. It's bizarre to me that all this seems to have caught the PNP by surprise. I think now is the time for those great ideas in the budget debate to be rolled out and fleshed out. I think now would be a great time for the manifestos to be rolled out. So we have lots of time to go through them and interrogate them and ask questions and figure out whether we think they can work or not. I think we should be having constituency debates, town halls, community town halls, sectoral town halls, panel discussions. I'll moderate some of them. But that's not what we're going to get. You know what we're going to get? Instead, the political rallies and the appearances will increase. The sound bites in the newscasts are going to increase for sure. The political silliness will increase. The silly crosstalk and insults at both sides, coming from both sides, and threats of defamation lawsuits probably, all that will increase as well. Then now we're going to get an election announcement, then a rush to the finish line, manifestos, maybe if we're lucky 2 weeks before election when we don't really have time to read them properly, or maybe even a week or 2 days, who knows. The political debates are going to happen. I've participated in those over the past few years. I think they're very important, but they're not nearly enough. We need more, but will we get it? Not until we the people insist on more. So get together with your community groups, your youth groups, your women groups, your men groups, your church groups, whatever it is. Invite the candidates in your constituency to come and talk to your citizen association meeting, your neighborhood watch group, your church. Have a community town hall. Invite both sides. Ask the questions you want answered. Get together with other people who have questions as well. Insist that the politicians answer your questions. If we want them to do better as candidates, we have to do better as citizens. So what do you think? Drop your comments below. Like the video. Share it with somebody you think might be interested. Subscribe to the channel. Click the notification bell so you know every time I drop a new video. I'm Dionne Jackson Miller. Thanks for watching. Gone back to my tea.